like, ooh, I'm going to show you myself. It has a log. He described it as a log. He said it's about 9 feet long. He's like, it's big, and it throws it. But when it threw it, he said, you know how things tumble, like if you were to take a pencil and throw it like you were trying to stick it in a wall? He's like, it didn't tumble like that. He said it spun like around, like a spinning top would spin. It spun around over their head and into the river. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, man, this is so crazy that I didn't know I was going to be able to get out of the situation because I was too old to run. He says the guy that was younger takes off running and leaves him, and he's kind of jogging along the riverbed, and he's got to figure out a way to cut up and get up that ridge to get to the higher ground and get towards the direction of the truck. So he's jogging along and running. He can hear this thing kind of running along in a tree line above him, but he knows he's not going to outrun this creature. And so he's jogging along as fast as he can. The young guy just takes off, gone. I mean, this guy's freaking gone, left him. Cuts up, cuts into the tree line, is gone, left him. And he said, James, the only thing I could think of was to pull my sidearm and fire it in the air. I knew I couldn't fire it at this creature because I've been around them before, and if I was to shoot it, I was going to die. He said, so I just stopped because I couldn't run anymore, and I started firing my sidearm in the air. So he fired it 3 times, and he heard everything go silent, like the whole woods went silent. And he thought to himself, well, maybe I bought myself enough time to where I can get to the truck. So he starts cutting up the little ridge and gets into the tree line and gets into the woods. And as he's getting up there, he hears the truck coming, like knocking over smaller trees that they drove in on. And the guy pulls up next to him, not next to him, but pulls up and says, get in the truck, get in the truck, get in the truck. Well, while he's getting in, he realizes that this truck, which is their company truck, has a huge indentation by the passenger side wheel well. You know where the wheel is?
Oh, yeah.
You know how you have the little circle, and you have the wheel where the wheel rolls, and then above that you have that little thin piece of metal that kind of, that makes that front, I don't know what you would call it, but it has an indentation, like somebody ran into it. Now, they didn't have that indentation when they parked it. And so he ends up getting in the truck. They back out of there. He spins it around. They drive off. And they get back to the cabin which they were staying. And that night, he tells him the rest of the story. Well, when the young man left him and ran and got back to the truck, another one was chasing him towards the truck. And when he got to the truck, he had the keys in his hands. He got around to the driver's side door, and the only thing he could do was kind of slide down on the ground because it was cutting him off on an angle. It took an angle to kind of intersect him, but the angle led it to the truck. And he said the thing hit the truck so hard that when he hit it, the truck slid, bumped him. He hit the ground. When he's on the ground, he slides down. He gets up on his knees. It hits the truck. The truck moves, bumps him. He falls on the ground. He hops back up, gets in, and he pulls off. He it wasn't like he knew where Steve was. He just was driving to get away. He had to go backwards to get out. He just started driving towards the river to get away from it. And when he was driving towards the river, he saw Steve coming up, and so he drove towards Steve, and Steve got in the car, and they both backed out of there. And that's probably the worst Bigfoot encounter that I've ever heard. Period. That's it's crazy. I have some other ones that are extensively long that are way worse than that, but just from a short story, within a time frame we have to tell, that's probably one of the worst ones.
Well, Dark Waters, like in the forest system, since 1900 to 2014, do you realize there's been 14,000 people who've gone into the U.S. forest system that never came out? Now, some of them could have maybe, died, fallen in the river, went off a cliff, committed suicide. But 14,000 people, in that time span tells me something is strange going on. So, I mean,
Oh, I guarantee you.
And some of the cases, too, like there's like little, in one case, it was like a 5-year-old boy and his parents were camping. The kid was like maybe 50 feet away from his father, and his father took his eye off the kid for maybe 2 minutes. Father turns around, the kid is vanished, gone. And they did a massive search in the campground. They found the body remains of that 5-year-old 15 miles away, up on a part of a mountainside, naked, his clothes kind of like, off to the side. And, the forest police said that, or the report on it, he would have had to cross like a couple major rivers, and how could a 5-year-old get 15 miles away, in a 2-day time frame? So, this makes you wonder, you go out in the forest. I haven't even talked about my Bigfoot experience till I did the show. Because, if something like that, you go tell people, they'll look at you like, hey, you're strange. But you know what? If you run across something like that, it's something you'll never forget. And I'll tell you, I was never so scared in my life as that moment. I'll tell you that. It was the scariest. People said, hey, Gary, why didn't you take pictures? Well, you know what? I didn't even think about taking the picture. All I wanted to do was get in the car and get out of there, and hoping. I was so scared I was going to be killed. That was the fear it was going for me. I thought I was going to be just dead.
No, you know what? I've had people contact me because the number is public, and so I have people contact me, and they'll say, well, why don't you gather evidence from people, and why don't you get them to give you evidence? And I'm like, first of all, I am a storyteller. What I do is I retell the stories. I don't really worry about getting evidence. And I said, but I've asked people about evidence before. When I ask them, they say, well, I was there, but I wasn't thinking about taking a picture. That was the furthest thing from my mind. I'm like, yeah,
well,
that wouldn't be on my mind either.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I had numerous people since I first brought it up. I don't know if you know who Ed Romans is, but he's like Canada's #1 folk singer in Canada. I mean, if you lived in Canada and you mentioned Ed Romans, you know instantly who he was. Well, he contacted me like 2 months ago when he was on my show. He ran into a Bigfoot. And he had the same type of experience where it kind of chased him, but then all of a sudden it stopped. So, I mean, him and his dog, actually, so I don't know. My feeling is that when people say they're friendly and all that stuff, I don't believe it. I mean, honestly, they probably look at us, as, I don't know. But, like the Indians, when they talk about the Bigfoot and all that stuff, they all say the same thing, that they didn't like humans.
No, they say that they didn't like humans and they eat humans. We got to be more specific. That's what they say.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you in a minute, no, they will eat your children. So, but, I think that just like my personal philosophy is this, and I say my personal philosophy is, I think that just like any other intelligent being, there's differences in personality. So one of them may have a more aggressive, manic, crazy personality than another one. And it just depends on the luck of the draw, what type of personality you run into. So I think that it's possible that someone will have a less than negative Bigfoot encounter. And it's equally possible that someone will have an extremely terrifying negative encounter. Now, what I will tell you that I don't believe is when someone says, well, I go out into the forest every day and I can talk to Bigfoot and they teach me how to stack rocks. And I'm like, nah, get off my phone. Like, I don't believe that. That's insane. Like, that's crazy, And I've had people call me with stuff like that. And there are people all over YouTube who you listen to their, stories and they'll tell you, these things are that friendly that, I can feed them and I can give them an apple in their hands.
Yeah, I've heard some of those. I actually had a lady on my show back 4 months ago, told me, she lives out in the woods pretty much. And she said that the Bigfoots would come to her cabin and at night and throw rocks, against the cabin wall and door and all that stuff. But I and she said this was going on for a long period of time. But if they're going to take the time to throw rocks against you, I mean, I would think that if they're smart enough to do that they would have waited for her to go out, during the daylight and grabbed her, and she would have been history. I just, so, when I hear stuff like that, it makes me, I'm polite, like you said you are. I listen, so.
Yeah, and that's that. You can, only thing you can do is be polite in a situation like that. You don't want to tell anybody if they're crazy, but that's just not something that I believe. I'm sorry. That's not something that I believe at all. That's not something that I believe at all. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. That's the bad thing, Gary, about doing interviews on a porch in the hood in New Orleans. Like, you will literally have, like, there's a guy that just walked across the street with a black hoodie on, all black on, hoodie, black pants, and then he stops on the corner, he looks up at me, and then he kind of steps back into the darkness where you can't see him on the side of his house. And so I lost my train of thought for a second because you got to pay attention. Oh, yeah. I'm up on an elevated porch where I could see you, but there's one blind spot, which he stepped into the blind spot because there's like a wall, a little corner wall right there. He decides he's going to step into the blind spot, but it looks like he went on about his business. Well, I would hate for there to be some drama live on radio. That would be crazy.
So would I. I'd feel bad. I mean, what's the crime rate where you live like?
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's like Baghdad down here, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. Man, that's New Orleans as a whole. I tell people all the time, this is a great city to visit, hang out in. But unfortunately, some very bad things happen here. We got a bunch of bad people here. Yeah. We got some bad actors down here. But for the most part, if you're coming down here, you're going to go to the tourist areas, French Quarters, and hang out. You're not going to have a problem. You really got to be doing something stupid to have a problem. But when you get into the neighborhoods, that's where, the sharks are. And that's where the problems are. So, I just happen to be in one of those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I just got to be on top of things.
I know, like, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Seattle area, but my dad's brother lived in Oakland. And, like, when I was, like, 4 or 5, all the way up to probably 13, like, almost every summer, I'd get, shipped down to Oakland, California. And I don't want to sound racist, okay, but I'm Caucasian, okay? My uncle was Caucasian. But he was the only Caucasian in the whole neighborhood. And, I remember one time his children, my cousins or whatever you want to call them, we went to the movies and they ditched me there. And I'll tell you, I was really scared because, I mean, we're talking about the early 60s. And, neighborhoods, or they can be pretty bad. And where my uncle lived, it was in a real bad neighborhood, really bad. I mean,
I believe you, man.
Yeah,
and just to put you at ease, talking about your life experience ain't got nothing to do with race. There are bad neighborhoods all over the place. There's bad white neighborhoods, bad black neighborhoods, bad Latino neighborhoods.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to be in nobody's bad neighborhood. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Especially at night.
What color your skin is.
Yeah,
I ain't trying to be in nobody's bad neighborhood.
Like on some of the road trips I've been, out riding on, going halfway across the country and going into a town late at night, because I ride a Harley, right? And immediately, I'm looked at as a big bad biker because I'm not a small dude. Heck, and tell you, you can get harassed really fast where it can get really scary real fast. And then you decide, well, you know what? I'm not going to get a motel room here for the night. I'm going to ride that extra 50 miles and go to the next town.
Oh, no, dude, I know what you're talking about. Years ago when I was syndicating my financial talk radio show, I would have to go out and meet different AM radio station managers because, typically you send like a CD out and they'd be like, okay, we'll carry your show. But I wasn't having success, so I was like, I'm very good with people if I can get in front of them. So, man, I was going to some of these smaller towns that had AM radio stations, and I was driving, and I ended up spending like in Motel 6s the night and Super 8 hotels and, those type of hotels.